The school committee out of executive session at 7:10 p.m. Agenda item number 4 is the COVID-19 update.
Just a quick update tonight. Conversations about pool testing continues. It's something that we submitted documentation to the state and to the agency that's working on that. We're hopeful to try some pool testing over the summer, if not just before the end of the school year at the high school level, just to kind of work out the bugs. We don't have an estimated time of arrival on those for our district at this point in time. As I'm sure you've seen and or heard, a lot of rules are shifting based on the 24th of May. We've maintained that as a school facility, we're staying the course currently unless we're mandated otherwise. So we're still masking and whatnot. There are some spaces that are not schools, like our central office, where people who are vaccinated are starting to know the rules and say, I don't have to have my mask on at this time. I'm staying apprised of all of those rules and making sure that we're following them. Some of the changes are tricky. They feel economic to me, but those rules will follow. And another layer to this is certainly around our end of year, and people are starting to ask me, are we changing things tomorrow? Well, the guidelines for spacing on buses has not changed. The guidelines for spacing in the schools has some caveats, but they still haven't changed enough so that we can feed people lunch and things of that nature because of the rules that still exist. There was a shrinking of one rule. If you're doing certain things, instead of being at 14 feet, you can now be at 6. And so there's some things that we're adjusting with. And when I say things are changing quickly, I mean, there was new language today. But it didn't relax things so much so that you won't see masks. The effort to vaccinate students continues. I continue to talk with local medical professionals about what options we have. I have put us out there as an organization to do everything that we can to help get kids vaccinated, and if they choose. And so we've offered up things that include trying to find ways or using relief funds to facilitate transportation. We're willing to host if that works. The challenge right now is it's the Pfizer vaccine for 12 plus currently. I anticipate that dropping down below 12, but probably not until later in the summer or fall. But to that end, the Pfizer vaccine has more specific criteria for its administration, including refrigeration units that are very specific. There's a time frame in which, once it's been kind of mixed, if you will, to be used as a vaccine, that it expires. Moderna is much easier to work with, and the Johnson & Johnson or Jensen one that has come back online is, what I hear, it's easier to work with, just from a shelf life and stability perspective. So what I've been saying out publicly is we're going to continue to follow the rules. My recommendation is that we stay the course. We have just a few weeks left of school, and I don't want to experience major disruptions at this point in time that I don't think would benefit us from a teaching and learning perspective. It won't give us enough time to transition and gather data that would be helpful in the fall. So again, my recommendation is we just stay the course and maintain safety and following the guidelines. And we're going to continue to err on the side of caution. If we're not sure, we're masking, what have you. We're doing all of that. I will say that we have made a push by way of superintendents to the state saying, we want to know what's up for the fall. We want to know soon so we can be prepared. I am pledging to our community to do every single thing that we can do to be back to school 5 days a week in person in the fall safely. And that is our ultimate goal, up to including looking at potential rentals of property if we need to have more floor space to do what we want to do. So we're really taking a all in to be all in the fall approach at this point in time. There's a lot of things that could change between now and then, but that's our approach.
That's right.
More of a supplement than a question. I just want to remind folks that Lewiston remains a unique school system in the state of Maine, with high density and so many students enrolled. And additionally, in the community, We, on the city side, have been hearing a lot about high hospitalization rates, high infection rates, and lower than what was anticipated vaccination rates. And so, as someone who has gone through the vaccination process and is well over 2 weeks since, it's A, such a relief, but B, have had no adverse reactions or symptoms. And, you know, I'm a person with a lot of allergies, so I have some hesitancy, but would just encourage folks to communicate with their primary care facilities and get out and get that vaccine if they are able to.
Mr. Anderson?
Given the authorization, I would, my hope would be that the state would be looking at a situation where vaccinated students working with vaccinated staff could be back to totally normal school. And for Lewiston, that could potentially mean that if our high school students are vaccinated and staff is vaccinated, that we could be back in the fall pretty much normal. If the guidelines for schools follow the guidelines for the rest of society, and obviously the lagging authorization as the companies go through the process for younger kids presents a problem for bringing elementary schools back with full density and normal life and potentially no masks. But it seems like we ought to be able to aim for that for vaccinated high school kids. That would be my hope at least. And you know, obviously, there might be other options for folks who don't opt to get vaccinated. Maybe remote learning can continue as an option, that kind of thing. But you know, my hope would be that we can push the state to treat vaccinated kids the same way that we're treating vaccinated bar patrons. That seems like it's not too big an ask.
Following up on that thought, I'm a little uncomfortable with sort of incentivizing normalcy, like using normalcy as a driving factor to get kids vaccinated. I think it's a personal choice. I think there's health reasons, there's all kinds of factors, and parents should be able to choose what they think is best for their own child. And I think that the way things are going and progressing, I have faith that our kids, I think our goal should continue to be getting our kids in school 5 days a week in the fall, regardless, and finding ways to do that safely. So I think that the majority of the population would prefer their kids being in school, all of the kids being in school 5 days a week with some accommodations, maybe masking or however that looks, rather than saying, well, half of our district or a quarter of our district gets to go back to school full time, but the rest of you can't. I think that might be an okay backup plan, but I think the primary focus and the primary plan should be focused on how we can get most or all of our students back in school 5 days a week, not some lower bar than that. Yes, Mr. Madras Collins.
I have great faith in the members of our community and their commitment to doing what's best for the public health here. And I have every confidence that folks will get vaccinated. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be planning with that as the driving factor. There's no reason for folks in any situation other than if a doctor says to not get vaccinated. And so I think that we certainly shouldn't let a few folks who are unreasonably and irrationally off base about this vaccine delay the vast majority of people getting back to normal education. You know, and frankly, I also would point out that the only way we're going to be able to put this pandemic behind us is if everyone gets vaccinated. And so as a district, if we can provide incentives for staff and for students to get vaccinated, I'm all for it. You know, state of Ohio is giving people a chance to win $1 million if they get vaccinated. So the prospect of being able to go back to school normally certainly strikes me as a reasonable incentive for our kids to go ahead and get the vaccine.
Any other discussion? Did you have anything else? Agenda item number 5 is report from student representatives, and Omar has joined us.
Umar, do you want to share anything today?
For like a student update?
We can hear you a little bit. Hang on one second. Dave's going to turn you up.
Try that on.
Hello? Can anybody hear me? So you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. For the most part, there isn't a lot of updates. I'd have to say that a lot of people are starting to get used to being remote a little bit more. Obviously, everyone wants to go back, but you know, it's getting better. A lot of people have definitely been worried about COVID and all that, especially with cases rising in Lewiston like crazy these last few weeks. Besides that, there's not much else.
Thank you.
Thank
How
you.
was prom?
Thank you.
I don't think you heard you. Agenda item number 6 is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like removed? Mr. Majerus-Collins.
The minutes from May 5th. I believe that vote number 3 is incorrect. And I would want to check that with member Potvin, who's not here today. But I don't think that those certainly that vote allocation strikes me as incorrect, and I'm not sure what else, but I would pull May 5th until we can offer member Potvin the chance to look at it and potentially review the date.
Vote number 3.
Yeah, vote number 3.
Any other items that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the rest of the consent agenda is approved, adopted. And we're going to table that until he's here. Okay. Agenda item number 7 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and or affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Does anyone who's attending in person would like to speak on a non-agenda item? Or any of the attendees online? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 8 to receive and approve the field trip request from Lewiston High School.
Trying to see if we have anyone.
Just the one was going to join us as an attendee. I don't see it.
I wonder if he tried to come in early and we weren't there.
Well, we knew that that was going to be the case.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
I'll motion to approve that field trip. We can do that without a recommendation.
Second.
If I could just to say a little bit, just to share it up publicly, that this is a flight with the Civil Air Patrol at the Lewiston Harvard Airport. This will happen early June, and they have a backup date for weather. And this is some students having an opportunity to actually get up in the air and connect it to some of the programming and pathway that they are very interested in for their future.
That's just 2 students, right?
Yes, there's 2.
Do you think it's important to share the history of why this is a set aside and not part of the consent agenda for members that might not already know?
Sure. Any trips like this that have what I think are inherent risk, beyond taking the bus to somewhere not too far away. Anytime there's an overnight trip, anytime it involves water or other potentially hazardous activities, we bring those before the committee separately. Those are not in the consent agenda for what becomes kind of annual approvals for things that happen on a regular basis. Although because of COVID, there really isn't anything that's an annual 2020 trip or 21 trip. So we bring those before the group.
Mr. Majerus-Collins.
So just in trying to understand this, the entire the flight is the point of the trip. It's not, they're not using the flight to get somewhere. That is
Correct. The flight is the field trip.
Ms. Wright.
So just so folks know, I will be no on this because of the inherent risks. I know I sound like I hate fun, but that has been my way I voted on riskier ones.
Mr. Gopal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe our older members would know, wasn't there a accident years ago involving a sort of a patrol?
The same field trip, yes.
I'm sorry,
It was the same field trip.
This it was many years ago. We did lose some students to an air accident.
When you say lose, you mean they died?
Yes.
How many years ago?
98.
Oh, yeah, it's
Sounds great.
so much money.
It was Councilor Jensen's class, which I believe,
That would have been
He
more
would
recent.
have graduated. in
No, I graduated in
2009,
'98.
okay, but I don't know the year, but it was in that same time frame.
So,
Right.
2007.
Was it that? Okay.
I was a little bit.
I never heard of that.
Wow.
Has that field trip been done since that?
I don't know if it's been done since then or not.
And I'm assuming this is a real dumb question, but I'm assuming that the parents have to sign a permission slip and they get all the parameters of what the inherent risks are by taking this flight.
Yes, and they also have to transport to and from the facility.
This is something that, sorry.
I'm sorry. In regard to the past history, was there any liability factors of the school committee because of that horrible accident?
Not to my knowledge. Although that predates me my whole time, sorry.
Mr. Driscoll.
So I just want to hone on this because it is, I had not anticipated a thing like this. The incident in which students died, what was a result of the field trip, right? I mean, we're not talking about a situation where a student died for an unrelated reason while on the field trip.
There was an aircraft accident.
If Mark is doing this, what did you vote to do?
The other thing I would say is we approved other trips that were not Civil Air Patrol, but just pre-pandemic, we had students fly to Europe to do a tour in Europe, travel tour. So flights have happened since then. Colonel Loveland may have some more history. Hi, Colonel, how are you?
I'm good, sir. And yourself? I just was just able to get into the meeting, so I only caught just the last couple of minutes of your conversation.
Yeah, a couple of questions have come up about the terrible tragedy that was many years ago, and to see if this type of field trip was comparable to the one years back.
I would say that from respect that it is considered an incentive or an orientation flight, which is exactly what it is, that would be similar. The dissimilar portion would be that the instructor that was flying the aircraft during the accident in 2006 was a civilian flight instructor, and by all accounts, from the information that I have gleaned since then, and I started with the district in 2010. He was flying very aggressively and erratically, which would, if the instructors had known at the time, I'm absolutely certain would have curtailed any continuation of the flight. So from that respect, the difference with this flight would be that this is a sanctioned orientation flight through the United States Air Force, through the Air Force JROTC, and through the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol provides the pilot and the curriculum, basically, if you would, for the orientation flight. The particular pilot that would be flying this orientation flight is Lieutenant Colonel Greg Curtis, who was with the Civil Air Patrol. He's a lieutenant colonel with the Civil Air Patrol. He's also a retired Air Force pilot as well. I have very much extreme confidence in his capability. So again, to your original question, the The difference would be that this is not a civilian flight instructor, but a very accomplished pilot. And the program is again sanctioned through junior ROTC and the Air Force.
Carl, could you let us know the I guess size of the plane that we're talking about here? I mean, is this a small plane? My very limited understanding is that those are riskier, but I could be wrong.
Yes, sir. That's a very valid question. Typically, I could check to see if it's different than what I expect, but I would expect that they would probably be flying in a Cessna 182 or 172, which is a 4-seat aircraft. Typically, they would have the pilot and one of the students in front flying with an opportunity to fly. They fly from the Lewiston Auburn Airport to a destination airport, could be as close as Brunswick. Might do a seat swap, and that student that's sitting in back might move to the front. But it's a general aviation aircraft that's used for flight instruction. If it is something different than that particular Cessna, it could be maybe a Piper aircraft, but I'm fairly certain that it's a Cessna 172 or 182. That's very typical for this type of orientation flight.
Yeah, so it's gonna be 2 students, correct?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And are they both seniors that are going to be pilots when in the military? Is that kind of what the concept of this is for?
The concept of the incentive flight is not necessarily to be an inducement to go into the military. Junior ROTC is not an inducement to going into the military. There's no requirement. The connection, and the one student is she's a junior. She had applied for a flight academy scholarship this past year, but had not gotten that particular scholarship. But the one student is a junior, and one of the other students is it depends on who gets the opportunity to go, but would be either sophomore or junior. But the point of the incentive is to give them an opportunity to see and feel what flight is like. And sometimes it's very much life-changing. It was for me when I was about 13 years old. I took up a flight with a friend, and when we were about 13, and he became an instructor pilot in the United States Navy, and I was an instructor navigator in the United States Air Force. So it very much is life-changing, and it set a path that we chose to make aviation a career. And that, if that's something they choose, that's an opportunity to just to get a taste of that and to see what flight is like. Just, I guess you could make it analogous to almost any career field where you got an opportunity to find out what it's like to be in that career field and get some experience.
Thank you. It seems like a fascinating thing and a great opportunity. And I just want to remind the board that when we do have tragedies that occur, we evaluate what has happened, and we do different processes so that we can eliminate the liability that the district has. And I know that one of our recent tragedies, we looked at the field trip process, and we made sure that when students went on field trips, it was very outlined that the parents had to know exactly all of the risks that could happen, and they have to sign off on that. And I think it would be a tragedy not to allow these students and their families experience these things for the possibility of doing something like this for the future. So I just want you all to know the back history of some of the things that we've done as a board to help prevent our liability.
And if I could add one more comment, please.
Yes.
When I started working, I was very cognizant of the tragedy. It had only been a few years prior, And I had a personal policy that I've that I have stuck with, that we would use, and shortly after the accident, there was another incentive flight, but it was on a US Air Force aircraft. And I wanted to stick with that policy of using, if they were made available, those incentive flights. The last one we had was on a KC-135 to do air refueling at 25,000 feet, which was very, very exciting for the 15 or so cadets that were able to go. But those incentive flights, I request them regularly in the fall and in the spring. They are very rare, and they're difficult to achieve. So that was one of the reasons I've made a change in, at least in my personal thinking, that the Civil Air Patrol offers these flights. I believe they're incredibly safe, and it would be difficult to pass up those opportunities when they come along, and they can make them quite a bit more readily available than the either the Air National Guard or the Air Force can provide incentive flights.
Can you give us just a really brief of what happens on these flights? Like, what will the students experience? What?
Yes, ma'am. They will meet with Mr. Curtis beforehand. They'll have some pre-flight briefing. They will have safety briefings as well. They will conduct a pre-flight of the aircraft, which would be similar if you were a pilot, a student pilot learning to fly. You would be taught how to conduct a thorough and complete pre-flight examination of the aircraft prior to flight. The part of that safety briefing would also include what the flight would entail, which would be a takeoff, which the instructor would do. If you are a student pilot, and they are not student pilots, not yet, unless they choose to be. If you are a student pilot, you, from the very first flight, you have some hand in the takeoff and the landing of the aircraft. They would not. The instructor would do that. But at some point at a safe altitude, they would be given instruction and given the opportunity to make shallow turns, climb and descend, to feel the aircraft and get a perception of the true feeling of flight.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, comments?
So to be clear, we're not actually talking exclusively about people or students going on a flight. At some point during the flight, they'd actually be flying the plane.
They would, under the control and the observation and the direction of the instructor pilot, yes, and they're sitting literally. They would be elbow to elbow. You're sitting side by side with dual controls.
And you said one of these students might be a sophomore?
It's possible, yes. I have some students that have, just like a lot of our students, they have goals and dreams, and sometimes those manifest before they walk in the door. In junior ROTC, I had one young lady that knew absolutely that she was going to be an astronaut, and I have no doubt that one day she will.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard. This is hard.
And I understand your dilemma. We always never want to have, obviously none of us would ever want to have any of our students harmed or injured in any way. And the only way we can guarantee that would be, I believe, to wrap them up into nice, neat envelopes and keep them safe. And that unfortunately can't quite live life that way. And if they choose to do something that I consider very safe, we would conduct it in the safest way possible.
So when I was in Iraq, I was friends with a lot of helicopter pilots. Just because it's advantageous to have somebody that can fly you anytime you wanted to go somewhere. And a lot of them started off in programs just like this. one of the guys actually got really close with, still talk to this day. His very flight was on something very similar as this in high school. And he's one heck of a pilot. And I think in this realm, we can't let our personal feelings get in the way of what's going on. We're here for business. I don't mean to sound harsh, but the parents know the inherent risk of what's going on. The kids are not stupid. They know the inherent risk going on. If something goes wrong, what's up must go down. And so I think honestly, it'd be a really disservice to the kids not to allow them this opportunity when they know the risk, the parents know the risk. You know, we can think of a million reasons, things that can happen to kids on a daily basis in their daily lives. So I'll be voting yes on this proposal.
Mr. Richards Collins.
Yeah, I mean, this is hard. I can see why somebody would want to do this, but, you know, I've heard mention of liability. You know, not so much my concern here is just that we've got a responsibility to keep kids safe. And, you know, there was a mention of, you know, honestly, even on a bigger plane, I might feel differently, but I can't vote for this.
Hawkins?
So as most of the committee has heard repeatedly, because I talk about it a lot, I grew up in Alaska. Up there, you see more small planes than you do big ones, just in general. I have ridden on several Cessnas and Pipers. That cockpit is so small, even if the kids were moving around, the dual controls, it's highly unlikely that the instructor wouldn't be able to quash something right quick. I don't think either any of these kids are getting this opportunity because they're reckless or foolish or going to do something dumb. They're doing this because they've exceeded expectations and done well, from what I understand. I think it's an opportunity that being on the ground and being afraid is one thing. But it's an opportunity that may not come again for a long while for these students. And they have worked to reach this goal. So I myself am voting in favor.
Mr. Ray, did you have your hand up?
No, just put someone here.
Okay, sorry. I think this is a really tough decision because I think it's a great opportunity for our students and I wouldn't want to deprive them of that opportunity, but there is some fear tied to it, some concern. So it is a really tough decision to make. Any further discussion? We'll start with Ward 4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
7.
No,
City Council.
No.
Yes. Ward 1,
yes.
2,
Yes.
3.
No. Motion passes 5-2.
Thank you, sir, for being here.
Yeah, who knows what happened. So
Oh, did you hear us?
Colonel, you're all set. You got approved.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate that. I will keep you apprised of those activities and of course the students that go beforehand and after and keep you well informed. Hopefully these opportunities with the Civil Air Patrol will come at a not a all the time basis, but maybe hopefully at least in 1 or 2 in the fall, maybe once or twice in the spring. And we will address this with you each time if that's necessary. And I appreciate your vote of confidence and I won't let you down.
It would be great if after the students participate in this, if they could come and give us a presentation on it. It would be good to hear from them directly.
Absolutely. That would be my honor. No problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen.
Agenda item number 9, to receive and approve the first reading of the 2021-22 Lewiston Public School Personnel Policy. Mr. Majerus Collins.
Okay, well, I guess I would first ask a clarifying question as to whether Vice Chair Damon's motion has been seconded.
Not yet.
So I guess I'll step back to give people a chance to do that.
Did try to say second.
Oh, did you second it?
I did.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear that, I'm
so
sorry.
I'm
It was
guessing you're gonna
seconded.
make-
All right, well, in that case, I guess I would ask either the sponsor of the motion or the person who seconded it, what exactly it is that we're approving.
I would request that we approve the language revisions as presented. And that we will be, on the second reading, we will be looking at any adjustments to, so.
So
That acceptable?
Yeah, and that the administration provide us with 2 proposals for adjustments on scale and fixed wages.
Right, and it should include the adult ed modification that was not in the back. As we discussed.
So I have 3 amendments to consider. The first amendment I would offer is minor. My understanding from previous consideration of this is that Christmas Eve is only a half day. And I would make a motion that that be changed to a full day. I think that Christmas Eve for many people is almost as important as Christmas Day itself. And we've done a really good job this year of supporting people's faith traditions, students and staff, and this is an opportunity to continue that work. I think that that would be a good gesture and one that would be well received.
if I may, Christmas Eve is not a student day, it is a half day for staff. Most of the time.
It's part of the collective bargaining agreement.
All right, well, seeing as that was not seconded, my second amendment I would offer would provide more specificity around what we're looking for on the compensation for substitutes and tutors and food service aides, lunch monitors, and food service substitutes. So the whole appendix B, yes, the whole appendix B section, to put that in stone at a 4% increase off of the previous compensation level for all except building substitutes and tutors, and with an acknowledgement that we do need to provide for adjustments for the new minimum wage where applicable.
Second.
Mr. Majerus Collins.
I understand that previous conversations about compensation through the personnel policy have been have demonstrated disagreements on the board, and that those are things that we're going to need to hash out at the second reading. But my understanding is that there is a pretty broad consensus around raising the wages for the most underpaid folks in our district, and that's these people. These are folks who do not have union representation, do not have benefits in the kind of robust way that most of our employees do, and who are paid, frankly, poverty wages. This is for me both a moral question about whether we ought to compensate people decently for their work, but also we're rapidly approaching a point where this is a very real employee recruitment and retention question. When we live in an economy where folks at Amazon and Chipotle and all federal contractors are only making $15 an hour. Meanwhile, we're talking about people under this policy that are making less than 13, with nowhere near as many hours guaranteed. I just think that we have a responsibility for the interests of our district, and we have a responsibility to do right by our employees in locking this into stone, and then we can have a conversation later on about the level of compensation on the SMN and SME scales.
Ms. Wright.
I believe the original intent of the motion was for all of this and its impact to come back to us at the same time for consideration, which I think is a better way to view the personnel policies when you're looking at all wages together. Not that I don't support what is being offered as an amendment here, but I'd like to look at the entire package altogether. I think that is important to do when you're considering all of these different positions that fall under this agreement, this policy, rather than a bargaining agreement or agreement. So I assume my vote will reflect that.
Any other discussion? Just because votes have been misconstrued in the past to mean one thing when they don't necessarily mean that something, I would like to state that I will not be voting in favor of this amendment, not because I don't support higher pay for our lowest wage earners. I definitely 100% do. I will be voting against it partially because of what Ms. Ray said, that the intention of the original motion included some of this language. And an hour and a half discussion that we had in executive session prior to this. So that's the reason I will be voting the way I'm voting tonight. Mr. Majerus-Collins.
I would just say that I see a significant material difference between when we're talking about the folks in Appendix B and we're talking about the folks who are in the SM and SME scales. That was where the bulk of the conversation was, and those are folks who are in a category that's more directly comparable to folks who are covered under collective bargaining agreements. Unfortunately, the folks in Appendix B are far from that sort of situation. And I'm just hoping in the course of this to get the school committee to make the commitment to higher wages at the 4% threshold and take this issue off the table so that when we come back on a second read, we can focus on the SM and SME conversation.
Any further discussion? Ward 4?
No.
5? Seven?
Yes.
City Council?
No,
No. Ward 1?
No.
2?
No.
3?
Yes.
Motion fails 2-6.
Further discussion, Mr. Majerus-Collins.
This will be my third and final amendment. I would offer a motion to direct the administration to bring back SM and SME scales that move from a greater percentage at the bottom of the scale to a lesser percentage at the top of the scale, as discussed both in our previous meeting in open session and then tonight again in executive session. And I would hope that, at least for my purposes, one of those would be at the 4% at the bottom of the scale and 2.5% at the top of the scale.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Ray?
again, I believe that we asked for this package to come back to us so we can consider the full impact. And so vote against this will likely be coming from me as well, because I think we have given administration that direction, and I trust administration to bring us back examples.
Mr. Majerus-Collins.
Yeah, I'll be interested certainly to see what the administration comes back with. I just think that providing more clear direction through a voting process is really helpful, and to give the interested public a better sense of what we're considering here. I'm advocating for a 4% at the bottom of the scale, tapered off to 2.5 at the top, to ensure that the bulk of any increases targeted at our lowest paid folks. But obviously we'll see how this vote goes, and then obviously a conversation that comes back in the next round of reading on this.
Ward 4?
No.
5? 7?
Yes.
City Council?
No,
No. Ward 1?
No.
2?
No.
3?
Yes.
Motion fails 2-6.
Is there any further, Ms. Wright?
so on the original motion, I really do want to emphasize that I trust the administration to bring back everything we talked about and considered, and give them time to spec it out, because it's very unfair to be like, do the Excel thing and it's magically going to work. So I appreciate all the work that they have put into this already, and I look forward to seeing the package that is brought back with the impact. So we can understand that fully, and the public can also see it ahead of time and make comments.
Director Brown, did you have anything else you wanted to contribute before we vote?
Not at this time, unless there are any questions about the language that we voted on in the first reading of the draft.
You don't believe so. Okay, Ward 4?
Yes.
Sorry, oh, are there any members of attendees online that would like to speak on this? Nope. Okay. Ward 4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
City Council.
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. We'll wait for that.
Thank you. Agenda item number 10, to receive and approve LCIP adjustments.
But I shared with you in the packet a brief explanation of some different things that we're looking to do, but I also want to refer to the table that was shared with you. We have itemized some things that date as far back as FY16 that are unspent LCIP funds. Some of them are connected to other projects, and they were unspent because of a few potential reasons. One is the project was projected to cost X, and then the estimate came back in as double, so the project was not completed with those funds. Or it was a multi-phase project that required additional funding down the road that's yet to come to fruition. Or projects were actually completed under budget, and there's some money remaining there. And so through different dialogues, I'm talking with our facilities director, Josh Bro, Superintendent Karen Parquette, and I, and also the feedback from all of you with different variables and thoughts. Looking at moving those funds as itemized to secure the repair of the Dingley roof. While there are a number of concerns about the facility, I think securing the weather is a top priority. This was approved in LCIP funding recently, I believe 2 years ago, may have been last year, but it was approved at less than half the current estimate. And so this reallocation of existing LCIP funds would allow for us to pursue replacing the roof of the Dingley building to at least get it to be watertight. I also shared in here, and it's not just anecdotal, if you've been to the building to see it, there are several spots in the upstairs floor where the roof has come down and you can see up into the attic space. It's questionable from a sanitization and health perspective. We had air tested and it came back okay, but at least people concerned. If you go up into the upstairs, we have numerous funnels catching water each time it rains. We have slate coming off the roof during inclement weather and chunks of copper that are also there for drip edge and other supports on the roof. So before we do anything else in that building, should we do something else down the road, I do think it's good to secure the building by taking care of that roof. And then the second part, along the upgrades, this is not a different amount. An amount of $151,531 was approved in LCIP to harden the exterior of the Longley building. And the request is to shift that from hardening to a proposal of going with upgrades to the actual spaces that the students use. There'll be some hardening because we have some doors that need to be replaced, things of that nature, but the scope of the project shifts more to school use and less about security hardening.
Move to adopt superintendent's report.
Second.
Ms. Wright.
So I appreciate these coming before us and opportunity to hear some of the options. Recently, I would encourage the facilities and finance subcommittees to continue the good work that they're doing in better projecting out so that we don't have situations like this. But in this situation, it works out well if you do have a need. So I think if we could more accurately present to the public and to the council and to the school committee in future years about forward moving plans and pricing, that'd be helpful.
Mr. Richards, Collins, and Ms. Wright.
I'm strongly supportive of this proposed adjustment. You know, in investing in the Dingley building and in Longley School are two critical spaces for our district, and I think that they're the right priorities for right now. I just want to remark on how far this committee's come, and I don't think anyone in this committee ever entertained the proposal, but last year we heard a presentation from the city about knocking down Longley School. And I'm just so glad that we're going in exactly the opposite direction of that. You know, I think that Dingley and Longley are important pillars of our school district, and investing in them is a wise decision for generations to come.
Swetla.
Yeah, no, I support this. I just want to know, did you have an opportunity to look at like real estate in other areas, and how did that go?
Yeah, I've been in communication with a local broker that found a number of pieces of office space and spaces like that we could use potentially. They were all lease pieces. There were none that were for sale. But I do see some viable options. And as we get closer and closer to the fall, I think that we could be looking at, if need be, renting a space for office facilities. The other concern that exists even beyond that, and thank you, Member Wood, for bringing it up, Dingley itself as a space is not big enough for what our district is. And so we have people working in spaces that are not confidential. We have, you know, members of the HR team making having phone calls and conversations in a way that they work to keep them confidential, but the spaces are not ideal for that. We just put up some dividers in one of the top conference rooms so that 4 more people can go in there to do work. People that transition between buildings on a regular basis. It's set up as an old school, and we're a pretty big outfit nowadays, and so space-wise, we may have to look at a plan B and what pieces might land where. The other alternative is to repair the downstairs, the basement level floor, but the repair cost on that versus the return is, in my opinion, just too high. I do think it's a good idea to secure the roof and keep it watertight, but when I say too high, I think the cost downstairs was estimated, and this was a year or so ago, at like $1.2 million to repair some things downstairs. I do think it might be worth our effort as things progress to look for another space or see what branches of our organization should work out of, where they should work out of.
Ms. Hawkins.
I do want to say this has been talked over with the finance crew ad nauseum almost. And I come at it from a couple of points of view. I've spoken at length with Mr. Damon about Dingley. She's a grand old girl. But like any grand old girl, upkeep is a thing. And with any building, if you don't have a good hat on, you're done. The problem with, it's not a problem, it's a joy, but a concern with Dingley, is that she's a historical building. Which means we can't just slap, you know, a steel roof on that. We have to stick with historical, which means slate and copper. The problem with that is it gets more and more costly every year. It's not a simple fix. And unfortunately, it has to be done or the building will eventually be completely useless. As it is now, having seen some of the issues in the building, it's usable. I do applaud Jake because I've seen some of the phone calls of, oh, that sounds interesting. They want how much? So I think that's going to be ongoing work, but I know it's going to continue to happen because if it's not the finance team saying, hey, what have you heard lately? It'll be facilities.
Mr. Madras Collins.
I would encourage the district to look closely at what parts of the current staff of Dingley might be better suited to work out of other sites in the district. I think that there's been a commendable desire to put everybody in the same place, but that number one, obviously that's produced some concerns about space. And also I do think that it perhaps is worth really taking a keen eye to see where those folks are most commonly interacting with the district, and whether it is with the administration or whether it's at a particular building or sort of more floating. But I just think that that's maybe nothing can move. But if things can move, then we should definitely look at that, especially with the potential of a little bit more space at the high school come the fall. Not much, but a little.
Member Damon.
I really, replacing slate roofs most expensive thing we could possibly do. I would almost recommend that we maybe talk to the roofing companies that we've talked to see if there isn't an alternative product that would meet the criteria. There are some composite materials that from any distance at all, you can't tell from slate. They stand up well, they're less expensive, and they have the tendency to stay on better. Nailed with copper nails, and they're notorious for not lasting, particularly now that we have a much higher density of acid rain because of environmental issues. I would, before I would want to see us tear a full head of steam on this slate replacement, I'd like to see if there's any type of alternative that might secure the building, but not necessarily detract from it. It is, as Member Hawkins said, a grand old girl, old being the operative word. Don't believe that the building is actually on the National Register.
Is it?
I thought it was.
I didn't think it was on the National Register. I think it's considered a historic building, but I don't think it's on the National Register. If it isn't, that allows us to do a lot more with it. There are some buildings that are on the National Register that become virtually impossible to maintain. So if it isn't, I would certainly look at that as an alternative route.
So, just a point of clarification, it is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's not a National Historic Landmark, being a much higher level of recognition, but it's been on the National Register since 1976.
Well, that's expensive. But I still think we can do something with it. If the work is maintained, I think we can do something with it.
So should we make an amendment to move forward with this? But before we do so, just to double check to see if there's any way we can cut the costs, if there's any, instead of using those materials.
Yeah, I don't know if we need an amendment. I can,
You'll do that.
I have roof repair on it, and so
Okay,
I will always be looking to find ways to responsibly.
I guess the way I'm looking at it is if we approve this shift of dollars, and he can cut it by $100,000, he'll have $100,000 left over for something else.
Okay.
But at least this would allow the project potentially to.
So do we don't need a motion.
We've got a motion.
no, we don't need an amendment.
And that's sorry. Okay. Are there any members of the public online that would like to comment on this? Yes, there's.
Yeah, I just want to say, and when I went to Central Maine Community College, I was a business major, and that really makes sense because I trust Jake to make the right decision about the roof on Longley.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ward 4?
Yes.
5?
Yes.
7?
Yes.
City Council?
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1?
Yes.
2?
Yes.
3?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0, and then this will go to City Council for their approval as a next step.
Agenda item number 11, to receive and approve additional professional development proposal.
Right, so you received in your packet a PDF of the document, and then I, before the meeting, shared a Google Doc. Very minor changes, but I wanted you to have the most up to date. Thanks to Ms. Litton, and her eyes on it helped me adjust a couple things, so I want to publicly thank her for that. The reason for bringing this plan to you is to have some conversation, one, to let you know what our plan is, and two, hopefully to get your approval on using some additional time for professional development. So part of the whole budget process was supporting our English language learners and providing staff some additional training. So the SIOP training is what we're referring to here in this plan. The sessions, we will have a session that we'd like to pay folks per diem with our Easter funds in August. And we're hoping to have a variety of options, a variety of days. Hopefully staff can make that work with some additional pay for that initial first session. Then we'll use some of our workshop days. And the part that we're looking for approval from you all on is using the morning half of our early release days throughout the year. It would be similar to what we've done with our parent-teacher conferences in the fall, where we have closed 1 or 2 schools for that work to happen, and the rest of the district is in session. In this situation, what we would do is we would use, so for example, the October workshop day, the October early release day, LMS and McMahon teachers would receive the training during the morning of the early release. That would allow, and students would not attend school. That would allow teachers to still preserve that afternoon time that's already set aside for PD. And then in November, it would be 2 other schools, and December and January. And then we would start the cycle again in February, March, April, and May to allow for those additional 4 hours to happen.
So they would no longer be early release days, they would just be no school days.
But for only those schools on those dates.
For those
So not
So it wouldn't affect the whole district.
correct.
So we could preserve our 175.
Got it.
Right. And our thinking behind it is just that, it would still count as a school day for our district. These are already days that we're thinking that parents would be preparing for additional daycare or support with their students for the afternoon. So we were thinking that it would make sense that they could, extend that if at all possible. And it would still preserve those hours and those days that we so desperately need for additional collaboration, but we would also be able to provide the professional development around our ELL learners that our staff needs. So this would be a combination of using some days in August, some of our workshop days, and then using these other days as well.
Questions, Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, so what if we, worst case scenario, are not back to school full time and we have these sacred Wednesdays now, right? So how would that affect this plan if we were not to go back full time?
That's a great question. I'm working on the premise that we are. We would need to adjust, but I could also see us saying that the check-in time in the morning, if we were to stick with the same model that we have now, that check-in time, that students would have no school. Students would have no responsibilities that morning of checking in with their teacher, just like if they would if it was a holiday, and still using that time, again, to preserve the time in the afternoon on Wednesdays for other needs that we might have, whether it's school-based, whether it's district-focused, or whether it's within a team of teachers that they've asked for.
So these dates here would be reflected on the school calendar that we're going to be looking at later.
The calendar you have later is the school committee meeting calendar.
Oh, school.
So yes, they're already reflected on the school calendar as early release days.
Okay.
We would
Communicate.
then have to create a version, I think we're on 6 of the school calendar for next year and indicate that there would be no school for those schools.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Mr. Mayor's comments.
I move that we adopt the additional professional development proposal as presented.
Word 4. Sorry, did you? Oh, sorry. Are any members of the public would like to speak? Seeing none. Miss,
I just want to say I really appreciate that it looks like you took some serious time thinking this over and discussing it with LEA and whatnot to make sure it was something that was anywhere near feasible. I think if we are back to school full-time, having these dates and specific requirements this far ahead of time will really get the parents aware and know what's coming up. It'll be a lot easier to deal with a lot of the things that we've had to deal with during this past year. So I really appreciate the work that's gone into it because surprises are fun for nobody. They're even worse for parents, so I like the work.
this one.
Yeah, so even if we weren't to go back full time, we can still put these dates in the calendar and they will know. So that nothing would really change necessarily. Okay.
It's so important that we provide this PD to our staff, and we have to allot the time that I would argue that's exactly how we have to.
Word 4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City Council.
Yes.
Yes. 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3.
Yes. Motion passes 8-0.
Agenda item number 12, to receive and approve the school committee meeting calendar for 21-22. Is there a second? Yeah. Mr. Majors's comments.
One thing where I want to offer potential. I've seen extensive complaints from members of the public about not being able to hear at these meetings. And with the changing state guidelines around proximity for vaccinated folks, I'd like to see us move back to Bingley if possible. And so my motion would be to amend the location to change the meetings that are located at Connors to being located.
Dave, would you like to share with us what you were saying earlier about the changing of our sound system?
Yeah, so just so, kind of insight into that. Right now, we have doing things obviously differently with the webinars and setup that we have established here. If we were to go back to Dingley, there would definitely have to be some work done to figure out how we make that all work, back in that room. Not that we can't do that, but we need some time, basically.
I just want to add real quickly, when there are topics of high interest, we have been using the Jordan room as a spillover. And right now that is dividers and desks for staff because of what we've had to do to house people. So we would lose our capacity to have that overflow piece. The other thing I would say, just as a caveat or nuance to this, is this current configuration has been working because we're spread out and it may not be ideal for sound or what have you. If we stayed here and things shifted from a science and safety perspective, we could use a different setup, but have this larger space for gatherings if we needed to.
Mr. Dana.
Yeah, I think that as we move forward too, the masks are gonna go away. That's gonna make it significantly easier for people to hear us. And I think we all could speak up. I know I have a tendency sometimes to allow my voice to trail off, but the masks are definitely a hindrance to this. So I think that, like Jake said, if we can pull this a little bit together, get the microphones closer, and I do think this is a far more usable space when we have any of the public involved. And I would support leaving it here, but getting rid of the masks and making maybe some minor changes to the setup. Then I think we're fine. I would adopt the meeting policy as presented.
We have much better circulation and ventilation here than at the Dingley building, definitely.
Where there's not.
Right.
Literally.
Miss Ray.
I would, as a person who has a hard time hearing, I ask you all to speak up when I have that issue, and I do think this is a better location. We can't see each other at Dingley, or at least I, in my little corner, shoved off to the side, can't see everyone. And I think it's really important for us to understand how much of a conversation it is between each of us. And we should remind ourselves to do better for the public. Hopefully, once we can get a little bit more, that helps too.
Mr. Madeiros-Collins.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Bingley is by no means a perfect meeting location. Really, there are a lot of advantages to here, but in addition to the comments from the public about hearing, and then the sort of, as I recall from meetings at Bingley, we also all had speakers that were located in front of us so that we could hear better as well. But in addition to those things, it's also a more accessible thing for the folks that I represent in downtown Lewiston, especially people who don't have reliable access to transportation. You know, those of us who are young and find that walking, no big deal to walk over to Connors. Older folks who live downtown and don't have a car might have a harder time, or folks who have disabilities and don't have a car might have a harder time. But it's just, I think we ought to do it, but obviously the committee's not going to go that way. So,
So I gave a little hint to what was coming in the next meeting earlier. People weren't here. We have purchased a microphone system for individual microphones for each of you that can connect to our mixer here. We've actually had it. We've been trying to find time to just get it out, test it, make sure it's going to work before we try it one night and not have things work the way we expect. And I just need somebody else with me. So next meeting, Lucas and I are going to be here. We're going to provide that microphone system. You'll each have your individual microphone, a button to push to talk. You'll have a speaker built into that so you can actually hear others. We can even plug in a set of headphones so that you can put a set of headphones in if you want to get better. So we're pretty excited about launching that next week.
Thank you. Any members of the public like to speak on this? Yes. Go ahead, Jason.
Hi guys, I just wanted to say, yeah, Connors is a great place to have your meetings, but sometimes a big room is hard for people to hear through. Maybe you could have your meetings in the library. It's a really good place. The library in the background is really good, and it's small. It's not too small, but small enough for you guys to have a good meeting.
Thank you. Ward 4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City Council.
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
yes.
Committee meeting calendar is approved 8-0.
Agenda item number 13, to receive and approve the nomination of Megan Parks as the school committee's representative to the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee.
So
I'd like to make that motion. I know that the position is reserved for someone from the school committee, and that has not been the case for the last bit of time, so I think it's entirely appropriate.
Go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to add, this crossed my desk late last week, and it was kind of time sensitive with when the city could also approve it if that's the way this goes. And my first inclination, and I don't mean this to slight anyone and by any stretch, just having known Megan for years and her involvement with the public health efforts around COVID and her work in mental health, to me, it just felt like from a school committee perspective, I would bring it before the committee to have her be that person. And I don't want it to come across as forceful or favoritism. I knew it was time sensitive, and it made sense to me in the moment.
Mr. Madeiros-Collins.
Chair Parks has done a lot of important work around health and wellness in Lewiston, that I don't want to diminish that. I do think that the most salient public health issue facing the schools right now is vaccinations. And it's no secret that Chair Parks and I see that issue quite differently. And so I can't support this nomination.
Any other discussion? Ms. Wright.
Can I ask more about that? I'm curious what your position is, I guess.
my position is that parents have a right to choose what they want for their children, and that it's great if people choose to get vaccinated, and it's great if people choose to not get vaccinated for their own individual reasons. And I don't think it's my place as a school committee member or our place as a whole as a governing body to dictate whether or not our students should be vaccinated beyond the vaccinations that are already required by law. Individual autonomy for the parents and the families and what's right for them, I think, is what I appreciate more than anybody dictating what somebody has to do with their own family members. Mr. Damon.
I think should also be pointed out that this position that is reserved actually for someone from the school committee, been very adequately served for many years by Ronnie Parity. And Ronnie has recently hired or resigned, so it's an open position. And with things being as critical as they are with the virus and everything else that's going on, this is a position that we need to fill. Certainly, she's been involved with it. She's supported, the public health issues for years. And I think she's the appropriate person from this particular school committee.
Mr. Madris.
So, I mean, I would point out that both we're dealing with COVID-19 vaccination now, but we're also looking in the fall at the implementation of the new state law to require that all students be vaccinated for common communicable diseases like measles, and that there was last year considerable a public debate about whether that state law should go into effect or not. There was a people's veto vote, and our community resoundingly supported stricter vaccination requirements, and Chair Parks opposed that. And so, again, this is, to my mind, the most important thing going on in public health right now is getting folks vaccinated for COVID-19 and ensuring that we have the highest possible vaccination rates for other communicable diseases. And we should have folks in public health policymaking roles who support that. So obviously, Chair Parks has her position on this issue. I have my position on this issue, and that's how it is.
Any further discussion?
I have to say, I just have to say something, and I've held my tongue a lot, and I mean, vaccinations, and I'm just gonna say this, vaccinations have caused damage to people's lives in the past. My stepbrother is mentally retarded because of vaccinations. So when you're trying to tell people they need to get vaccinated, you need to get vaccinated, well, whoa, that should be each individual person's choice, unless legislation says you've got to do it to get your kid in school or what have you. But you don't know where people are coming from. And so that's besides the point, really, when it comes down to it. Megan, I respect what she's done in this community. She has run a quarantine shelter. She knows exactly firsthand what all of this has done to the community. Like, she is not naive to it, so your own personal thoughts on vaccinations is what's swaying your thought on who would go into this committee. I just think it's not, no matter who goes into the committee from the school board, they're collaborating with other health professionals. It's not like they're making the decisions on their own. But I just have to say that this whole pushing vaccinations is not the voice of this board. And I don't ever want my name to be behind pushing of vaccinations, because I am not 100% for it. And I just don't think that's our place to say.
I would also like to add that I've been fully vaccinated against COVID since February, and my entire family is fully vaccinated against COVID. And I don't have to disclose this information, but I am. My perspective is not on what I think other people should do. I think other people should make the decisions for themselves. And I would actually be opposed to somebody representing this committee on any committee that is really hardline one way, no matter what, and not willing to hear anyone out or be flexible or respect other people's opinions. I think that that would be a much greater detriment to any committee than somebody who's open-minded and willing to hear all sides. Mr. Majerus Collins. Thank you, Jen.
There are issues on which there are a variety of legitimate points of view, and then there are issues where one side is scientists and experts and folks who have dedicated their lives to public health and saving lives, and then on the other side we have rando people on the internet. And you know, I would say that what vaccinations have given this world is hundreds of millions of people who got to live full, healthy lives. And so it's really, really disturbing to sort of hear this messaging that it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't matter if people get vaccinated, because it really does matter. And, you know, not everyone is medically able to get vaccinated. And the reason we need everyone who is medically able to get vaccinated to be vaccinated for both COVID and also a host of other diseases is because we have to protect people who are too vulnerable to get a vaccine. And so it is not just about a personal choice. This is about protecting the most vulnerable people in our society. And, you know, if folks on the board believe that we should be open-minded about whether people should have vaccines, then by all means, go that route. But I don't. And I think that we have a decision to make about whether, you know, the school committee is going to stand on the side of science or stand on the side of nonsense.
Ms. Wright.
I mean, I do agree with Member Dana that we have been represented admirably by Ms. Parody in the past. I don't know her opinion on vaccines or anything, and so that's why I was curious to hear what this was about. I think I will vote to approve Chair Parks in this role because I do think it's a representative and not. And if this board wants to take up a vote about whether or not we should be pushing for vaccines, for legislation, that sort of thing, I think that's not a position this committee has taken yet. I don't anticipate we would take that position, but I do think it's something that raises hackles, and so it's good to know where everyone stands on that, but it's not going to stop me from approving the nomination.
Any further discussion? Ward 4?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, members of the public. I keep forgetting that today. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this? No. Okay. Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
7?
Yes.
City Council?
Yes.
Am I supposed to not vote?
Or you can vote.
Yes. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
No.
This is 7-1.
Thank you. Agenda item number 14, report from the City Council representative.
Okay. I was trying to be a bit brief, but goodness. So the council met last week, the school budget was passed. I want to thank again the LPS staff who attended, as well as members David and Hoffman who spoke on it. After that exciting event, we moved on to workshop topics, including sidewalk occupancy policies for eating and retail establishments, as well as a temporary wellness shelter update, in which we learned that FEMA has extended the deadline to September 30th. And so they're going to stop accepting new folks at a certain point in the wellness shelter, but for now it's been going really well, especially at its current site. And they're helping a lot of people, which is great to hear. We also meet tomorrow. I almost said we always meet, which is also true. And tomorrow for workshop, we're handling pavement management and a review of Houston's current state of emergency and what powers that affords to different folks, and if we should take a look at reducing that given rates. In actions, we're going to name the task force. There's a bunch of permits and also setting some water rates and municipal budget stuff. In reference to the school budget, bear with me. School budget validation referendum election will be held on Tuesday, May 26th. Absentee ballots for this election are currently available from the city clerk's office, which is open 8:30 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. You can call the clerk's office, you can mail in an application form downloaded from the city's website, or you can go into the office at those times. The deadline to request that ballot is this upcoming Thursday at 4 p.m. And then to vote in the election on the day of is at the Longley Building from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you have any questions, please contact the clerk's office at 513-3124. Please go vote.
Agenda item number 15, report from school committee chair. I do not have any report to give tonight. Agenda item number 16, report from superintendent.
A couple of quick things. First is that last week we had our first holiday recognition of Eid that ended on Thursday. Feedback from everyone in large part was that it was a good communication and notification that people got a couple days in advance, a reminder over the weekend, and then as we got closer to, just a reminder we're getting close, and then when we got word, we shared it right away. And we used our messaging system the following morning, almost like it was a snow day, just so people, if they missed those other messages, kind of got a notice. So that went well. I think it was, from a first go of it, not knowing when the date will actually be, was really kind of stressing people out. The late of the week before, I had a number of people contacting me on a daily basis saying, when is the date, when will we know, when is the date, when will we know? So it worked out, and I think over time, people will adjust to that, and it'll just be something that we used to do. I will also say that I know that some media outlets took that story and went with it. It felt right. It really did, just from my chair. The families didn't have to make that tough decision of trying to go to school or celebrate their faith. So that was a good day, in my opinion. We also, by way of a grant and a recognition, our nutrition program has been given a van. It's part of a full plates grant. You might see an article in the paper in the next couple of days, but they got a full-on van with decals on it and all kinds of things, and it's really a very honorable thing to have received. Connected to Hannaford and also another organization, I want to say Berlin City, but don't quote me. But they found a number of organizations that were doing good things during the pandemic around moving food for folks and gave us this van, and the van is outfitted to continue to support people as things come up. Also released today by the state of Maine, the LRTC Student of the Year was released today. You might see that coming forth too. This is quite a selection process. We have a lot of students that are incredible students. And the reason I'm bringing this year to light is that the LRTC nominee who was awarded recognition by the state is Colin Merritt. And Colin is the son of Jason Merritt, who runs our carpentry program. Jason Merritt is the son of Alan Merritt, who has run a technical program or auto car care and small wood projects at the high school his entire career for the most part. So kind of a third generation hands-on, really great family and happy for them. And then also Wednesday, we have top 10. So that's coming up quickly. So prom went well. All reports were good from last Saturday night. Everybody had a good time. Everybody stayed safe and everybody went home safely and were able to come back to school today. I know that was a collaborative effort with EL. That went really well. So I throw kudos to their administration also for coming together to make things happen within the rules for kids. And people like Jay Dufort and Jason Fuller and others who really helped coordinate that. Missy Gender, the high school nurse. A lot of people who really put in a lot of time, and I'm sorry to get everybody's name out there, but did some amazing work to, again, hopefully coming toward the end of the pandemic, creating a situation in which kids could really have something. And remember, these kids that are seniors this year, they have all of that taken away last year. So this was kind of their one shot. So I was happy to hear that.
On that note, somebody called me on Sunday morning and they said it was a great event. The atmosphere was good. The kids were really looking after each other. They said it just felt like, literally, this is like, it just felt like Williston High School. And I think it's something to be commended from all the staff that involved and all the students that were involved as well. So.
I had a question on, is it possible to look at options to attach some sort of education around Eid with the school calendar, maybe on the flip side of the school calendar, so that people maybe will see that ahead of time. I know that there was a lot of misunderstanding around it being based on moon cycles, and why can't we just predict it based on what the calendar shows us for the moon cycle and things like that. So I think it might be beneficial to include some information with the school calendar at the start of the school year to explain the purpose behind that.
Like
What about all holidays?
Right, yes, yeah, I think that's the one that's creating the most
Yeah.
confusion right now, but yeah, explaining that a little bit better on the school calendar, I think would be beneficial.
There's no other holiday that's based on moon cycles, just
Right.
that. Correct.
Right, there might be some questions around the adding the Jewish holidays or something though, just because they're
Those are
newer, but.
advanced, they can predict that, so it's not like a.
I think
I still think it's good to share the information
It
so that while we're not trying to oppose a set of beliefs on one another, that, we do have neighbors that celebrate
good?
these events, and it's good to know.
Oh, it's back, never mind. Mr. Madeira's calling.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and might also say that in addition to potentially talking about sort of how it's calculated, if we got the space, and I don't know if we got the space on the calendar, but just sort of a one sentence on what each of the holidays that we recognize even is, because I think that a lot of members of our community may not know what each other's faith's holidays are about. And something even as simple as what an appropriate greeting is could be also helpful to include on that as well, as we move towards more inclusive and long-term ideas about religious holidays.
Agenda item number 17, school committee community announcements. Ms. Rick.
So this might be an interesting one, but now that people are out and about and doing things, I was in Forge earlier today and I was waiting for my coffee and a little bleary-eyed, but I did see that one of our teachers, Deanna Earhart, who's the digital media teacher at, I believe at the high school, is showing pieces there currently. And so as folks start getting out, I think she does a lot to support her students and their work. And so I wanted to take a second to support her work myself. It looked great. It was unmasked faces, which was a delight to see in this environment. And so I just wanted to do a little moment of promotion for her.
Agenda item number 18, future agenda items. Mr. Madras Collins.
This isn't a new one. I just want to flag. I think I don't know how many I have, but two that come to mind. One, in the hopes that we could potentially adopt a resolution around LGBT Pride Month. And given that our next meeting is the first meeting that we're having in June, that would strike me as potentially a good time to take that up. And then in the hopes that we can address the perfect attendance issue prior to the end of June.
Any other future agenda items? Agenda item number 19, to adjourn.
Second.
Ward 4.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City council.
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3.
Yes.
Thank you.
15 minutes.
8:44 p.m.